good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Live. We are continuing our Back to Basics series, I guess you should call it. And Darlene is here tonight with one of her favorite things, and that is heat embossing. So she's taken a number of classes with some of our vendor partners. She's got all kinds of tips and tricks. We're only going to scratch the surface tonight because she's just got so many, and she's done a couple of classes with them as well. So I'm going to just turn things over to Darlene to get things going. This will be the last of our Back to Basics here in September. We've got some other things planned through the rest of the year. However, that's not to say Back to Basics will not be coming back at some other time. So if you have Back to Basics ideas that you would like us to cover, then please do email us. I'm going to put the email address in the chat or in the comments as well. But if you have ideas, if you have things you want us to cover, please do let us know so we make sure that we're bringing you the content that you are looking for. So without further ado, I'm going to mute up my microphone and let Darlene take it away.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. I am so happy to be back. And as Sherry mentioned, I love heat embossing. To be honest, I wasn't a huge fan many years ago. I was very intimidated by it that when I took events or classes, my sister was the one that did all the heat embossing for us. And then Sherry put me in a trade show, and now I just can't get rid of it. I love it so much. So let's start off with the basics. Just to get started, these are some of the things that you would want to get started with heat embossing. You would need an embossing powder stamp pad. There is many in the market, but I either use the WOW or the Versamark. Majority of people I know use the Versamark. WOW is the one that I took many trade shows from WOW, and that was the one that they gave us, and I love them both. As long as it does its thing, it is great to use. So you would need an ink pad for heat embossing. And of course, you need powder, heat embossing powder. There are many colors. I will talk about superfine as well as regular. We will do some comparisons. So I do have a variety of embossing powders behind me. And the most important tool is the heat tool. So this is the embossing powder heat tool. It does have two heat speeds, so a lower heat and a higher heat. It's one of my favorite ones. I do recommend a heat embossing tool when it comes to heat embossing. I know some of the ladies use the Ranger, this one here, the heat tool. It just has not as high of a temperature than the heat embossing one. It does take a little bit longer. So if you are using this one here by Ranger, the Heated Craft tool, it does take a little bit longer to heat emboss. So that is an option, but any embossing powder one is a good one. We have the WOW. We also have the Sizzix. They're great. Other things that you might need is tweezers, or I like the Handle It. It's like a tongue twister tool. It's basically a heat resistant little hand, and it's to help you hold your paper. So you will see me use that a little bit. We are currently out of stock. I know it's on order or on back order. So if you're interested, let us know. So any of the products I'm using, if you're interested, we don't have it in stock, please send us an email and let us know. We for sure will let you know when they're back in stock. But so what else do we need? I like to have a paintbrush. One of my favorites is the Hero Arts little watercolor paintbrush, and you'll see why. Another good thing to have in your toolkit is a powder tool. Pink and Main is right now my favorite. It's a little brush. Oops, if I remember. It's a little brush. Ooh, you can see the powders flying there. It's a little brush, almost like a makeup brush that has powder in the barrel, and it helps take out the static off your paper. So you'll see me using that. Let's leave that open for now. You'll see my heat resistant mat. You can use a heat resistant mat. Most glass mats are heat resistant. Just make sure that yours is before you heat it. if you don't have any of these products at home, I also use a very old wooden chopping board. It's a great one too. So that is an option. Other things that you
If
will
I,
need.
sorry,
Yeah,
if I can chime in,
yeah,
do not use a self-healing cutting mat
yeah.
underneath your heat embossing, and I will let you guys figure out how I know that. Haha.
Even a silicone mat is not a good one either. That heat is too much. Depending on the silicone mat, some are heat resistant and some are. So just make sure you look at your products before you do something with it. Another thing you will need is, of course, a stamp set, any stamp set. So I am playing with two different kinds because I want to show you stamping with a sentiment and stamping with an image. So we'll play a little bit around those today. And what else do we need? That's pretty much all you need to get started. I'm going to start off tonight with just the basics, and then we'll talk about pigment ink and then how to use pigment ink. And of course, I know a lot of questions that were brought up is how to use the white pigment ink. So let's play and let's see the difference. So unfortunately, I didn't bring my Versamark. That's the one in the store. But I have my WOW here, and that's the one I will be playing with today. For today's live, I am using black colored cardstock so you can actually see the watermarks, like the embossing clear markings on it. I find if I use the white, you won't see it as much. If you do want to see it on white, just send me a message or write it in the comment box, and Sherry will for sure let me know. But I think black is the best way to showcase everything I want to showcase. If I am talking too fast, I'm too excited. So let's start off with the basic heat embossing. So when it comes to heat embossing, doesn't matter which brand, there are regular regular embossing powder and super fine. Basically what it is that the powder itself is either very, very fine or a little bit coarse. I love using the detailed one when it comes to sentiment. That way it's not blotchy. Either or will do depending on how big your sentiment is. So another thing is make sure you don't have a fan on. Don't sneeze, don't cough, because this powder will go everywhere. And I know we've all done it. If we've played with powder, whether it's glitter or embossing powder, we've seen a few of those already. So let's start with a stamp set. So I am using just a regular stamp set. I like using my Misty, so any stamping platform. That way I can double stamp the ink onto it to make sure that it is covered completely. So I'm just putting that in and I'm just going to put it anywhere. So let's do it on the top so I can show you super fine and regular, and we can take a closer look. So here I am, just sticking my sentiment down and making sure I'm on screen. So when it comes to any projects, because of the static that the paper has, using the powder tool helps take that static off, and it also helps the powder come off that isn't stuck to the embossing ink. So I just did a nice little wipe through. Don't worry about that powder look. After you heat set everything, you can always take a dry cloth and just wipe that powder off. So I'm going to put this here so it's not. Here is the embossing ink pad. So I'm going to stamp it. And let's stick this down. So I just like to run my fingers across and lift. So I'm not sure if you can see that. So there is a little watermark. Can you see that? I'm trying to see if you can see that little watermark. Hard to see, but Season's Greeting is there. What I like to do is re-stamp it to make sure that I have every single letter there. Hoping my paper did not move. And just do it one more time. Okay. So there it is. Season's Greeting is nice and inked up there with the watermark. Another thing I forgot to mention is having a scrap of paper handy to be your funnel. I just take my scrap of paper. So let's start off with the regular embossing powder. What you're going to do is lightly push, or if you have a small spoon, you can also use a spoon, but I just pour lightly, make sure the whole entire thing is covered. And I will pour and then just tap on the back of my paper. So I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but there's little specks here. So having a paintbrush comes in handy because you can tidy up, taking all those extra specks. Or let's say you have a random gold or embossing powder, you can use a little paintbrush to clean those little spots off. So when it melts, you don't get all these random dots. So I really like this one because it's really fine and you can get to the nooks and crannies of things. So here, I'm not sure if you can see my O has one little speck. I'm just going to clean it off here. Okay, that's just a way to clean so you have a nice sentiment there. So if I'm mass producing, I will usually stamp, pour my embossing powder, and leave it aside. And then once I have 2 or 3 ready to go, I'll heat them all at once. As long as your powder is on the embossing ink and you're not waiting like overnight to heat it, a couple of minutes, it's still sticky. None of that powder is going to fall off. So make sure you cover it when you're not using it, because I've done many times where my hand has knocked it down. So one thing now is to get your heat tool and we're going to heat set it. It is going to be loud. So I'm heat setting it. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Let me put on low speed so I can talk over it. So one thing you want to notice is make sure your heat tool is warmed up. So I warmed up just before the live, is just putting it to the side and just turning it on and letting it blow. And you know when it's heat set when the powder starts melting and becomes a solid piece. See how all that powder, I'm sorry, this is very satisfying just watching these melt. Okay. So one thing to do is make sure that all the pieces, you don't see any more powder form, and you can tell that I didn't take all the little dots here, but it's okay. So you want to make sure it is nicely melted. Don't put your hand over top right away because sometimes it's still hot and it's still liquidy and you're going to smear it. So I give it a couple of seconds and then now you can run your hand over it and it's fine. Nothing comes off, no powder comes off. Another thing to remember is you don't want to burn it. So you don't want to leave your heat tool in one spot for a long time because you'll notice it start burning. So I could take a little scrap of paper and show you what that would look like when it's burning. Also, that if you're doing bigger images, you can heat set on the top and heat set on the bottom. It helps prevent curling of your paper, but it also distributes the heat from the top and the bottom evenly. So here is the Lawn Fawn. This is their gold. So let's do that again, and I'll use a super fine. So same sentiment, but now I will use the super fine. And just for it. So this sentiment stamp is a little bit chunkier. When your words are finer, it does also make a difference. So I think the set does have a finer one that we can try out afterwards. So here, again, let's ink that up. And let's squish it down. So I like to do it twice. Just it's a piece of mind, and I think it's become a habit that I do all my stamping twice. Okay, let's put this aside. Have this ready. Oh, I did. And let's remove this. Okay. And here is the Ranger Super Fine Gold. So the particles are a little bit tinier. Stump. I'm just lightly tapping the back. I can tell that I have some little markings there, so let's see if I can clean it with the paintbrush. So another thing that I've learned over time is if you're heat embossing, make sure you don't have like cream or lotion on your hands. And then touching the paper, because wherever you have that cream or lotion, the powder really likes. So here I have a little smear, so I'm just gonna take off. There's some really big little smushies here, so I'm just going to take it off. So, especially with sentiments, you really want it to look nice. So for this piece, because my paper is big, I'm not using the hand-it tool, but as you cut your paper smaller, you really want something to hold that paper so you don't burn it, because it does hurt. So let's give it a second and let's melt this. Okay, did I catch everything? So can you see the difference? So same sentiment, I'm going to try to let it focus a little bit. So it's the same sentiment, but can you see, I'm not sure if it's really noticeable, but the top one, the Lawn Fawn one, is a little bit thicker than the Ranger one. Not a huge difference. So for a sentiment like this, you can't tell the difference, but seeing it in person, it's finer. The gold is not as thick, where this one has spread out a little bit to the sides. This one is more straight. So I'm not sure if you can see that. So the super fine does give you that finer powder for finer details. So let's try a different sentiment that can show you. Do I have one here?
It also seemed to me, Darlene, that the finer one melted faster.
Yes, it sure did.
So while you're working away, I'm just going to bring your attention to a question. You can answer it when it is appropriate, and you may already have it in your plan.
Yeah.
But Sheila is asking, do you have any tips for heat embossing on vellum instead of paper?
So with vellum, because it's more fragile, too bad I don't have a scrap of vellum here. It's the same way, but for vellum, because it's so delicate, I would use, especially if you have a heat tool that has a low heat and a high heat, use the low one and make sure you're going a little bit further away. So if your paper is here, make sure you're higher up and make sure you're heating top and bottom, because the heat will burn the paper. And I've done it a couple of times. So you have to be very careful when you're doing it, but it works. It works on vellum, like heat embossing on vellum, and it also works on heat resistant acetate. So lots of things you can do with heat embossing. So here is a more delicate die. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'm sorry, not die, stamp set. So it's this one here, Love and Joy. It's very, very fine, but let's try this out and see. So let me use, let's start with the Lawn Fawn one. So the regular one. Oh, I missed Joy. So let's do that again. Okay. Move that out of the way. Open this. And this is the Lawn Fawn Joy. And what I'll do, ooh, so that's a lot. Oops, I should put more powder. So powder is key, or you get lots of static, and I can see that now. So while this one is regular, and let me also stamp out the one with superfine, and I'll heat emboss both. Okay, So make sure that's out of the way. Where's my other black cardstock? So this one here is now, so the one on its own will be the Ranger one. So double and make sure I'm not, and another thing is when you're not using this, make sure it covers, because the worst thing is getting powder on it. You will sometimes get a little bit of powder, but I one time knocked down a whole entire, well, not entire jar, let's say a third of the jar onto it by accident, because you know those hands like to wave around. But okay, so here is the Ranger one. And close. Okay, so let's heat up this, and let's see if we can tell the difference. I just love it when it melts. So much fun. So I have to say they're pretty similar. So this is a Ranger one. This is the Lawn Fawn Run. So the way I would see it is that if you look at the Y here, there's more of an opening, same as the O. This one is a little bit closer. So it's not a huge difference with Lawn Fawn Ranger. I would say they are pretty good with it, but there is a slight difference. So I can see it because I'm right in front of it. I'm not sure if it would translate well on your screen here, but there is just a tiny bit of a difference. So that is the superfine and the regular, the difference. So let's try something else.
Before you go on, we have a question from Margaret. Is embossing ink harder to remove from the stamps, so to clean up, versus distress oxide or archival inks?
I find it really easy to clean up. And one tip that I learned from one of my trade show is that if you have an embossing ink, that you can use it to season your stamp set. So let's say you have this really stubborn stamp set that's not stamping well. I've been told, and I've tried it and it works, is you put the VersaFine on it, and then you put your ink on it to stamp, and it stamps really well. So I would say try it. So we can try it because I haven't used this new All In Create stamp set, but I do it a couple of times, and it's a great way to season your stamp sets as well. And I find it really easy to clean. And also because it's clear, you can't even see it. Okay, so now let's talk about pigment ink. So their VersaFine Clear is a pigment ink. It's also wonderful for heat embossing. Pigment ink is a slower ink to dry, so it does take a while. So if you're using it, make sure you let it dry before you color with it. You put color onto it because it will smear. What I also like about pigment ink is that you can use embossing powder. So first things first, I'm going to show you pigment ink with black embossing powder. And then I'm going to show you the pigment ink with clear embossing powder. So there's two ways you can use it. And for this one here, I won't use black because you won't see it. Let's get some white cardstock. Give me 2 seconds. And let me show you the difference. So here's why. I'm going to change my stamp to a bigger one so that way you can see it a little bit more on screen. That way you're not trying. So let me split this. So let's do the top and let's do clear. Okay. So this is if you really want that rich black for a sentiment or any color. Black seems to be my go-to. So there's two ways to do it. And with the embossing ink, you get that nice shine. So you get that nice metallic shine if it's gold or silver. You get that black glaze if you're using black. So you'll see it here. So here is the pigment ink. I am using VersaFine Clear Nocturne. Okay, I want to make sure my sentiment is covered and then stamp it down. Ooh, that stamped really nice. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. And let's put color. So let's start with clear. That is usually, oh, I lost my paper. Give me 2 seconds. It flew. And we really need this scrap of paper. Okay, so let's find my clear. So here is the clear embossing powder. Okay, so you want to make sure you cover the whole entire sentiment or the image. Okay, so it's all covered. I see that I have a little black dot here that's probably missing some powder, so I'm just going to pour a little bit more. And now you can see. Can you see how now it doesn't look pure black? It looks like it has like white stuff on it. That's how you know that your sentiment's fully covered with powder. I can see my little dot here, my tittle that has some ink showing there. So now it's fully covered. So this is clear. So let's start with clear on black. And let's heat set this. So once again, I start right to left for some reason. I think it's because of where my hand is. And when you start seeing it go shiny, that's how you know that it's melting. Okay, I'm just tilting it so I can see it a little bit more. And there. Once your heat tool gets working, it's really, really fast. So here is the clear on the black. So that was the black pigment ink with clear on top. So it just basically made your sentiment shiny. So really good look. But now let's do black on black. I am going to use another white paper just so I don't have to move the sentiment. Okay. So here is the black VersaFine Nocturne. I love VersaFine. It stamps so nicely. Also, re-inking your ink pads does wonders too. So here is the black embossing powder. So now I'm doing black on black. And you know what I should do too? I should do the clear with black, and we can look at all three. So this is black on black. Really hard to tell, but if you stare at it closely, you can see all those black powder on your sentiment. I see that I missed this little dash here. Okay, so that's black on black. And let's heat set that. So waiting for it to melt. There it is. So my recommendation is when you're heat embossing, tilt it towards you so you can actually see it melting. When it's flat like this, it's really hard to see where you miss spots. But if you tilt it, you actually see where there's shine and where there isn't. Okay, so here is on clear and here is on black. I don't know if you can see it though, but I can see that it's darker. Can you see that? Let's see. So this is black on black. This is clear on black. So the black and black is very dark. It's like as if you have like bold on it. Okay. And then let's try, since I have another sheet, let's try clear on black. So there's different ways to use it depending on what's already on your table ready for you to work. And there's no right or wrong. It's just playing with your embossing powder. So another thing is if you haven't used your embossing powder for a while, or even if you have, one little tip is to always shake it so you're mixing the powders inside. So I just give it a little shake so you're mixing everything up. And here. And somewhere, and then this is clear. So now I'm using, oh no, I wasn't supposed to do it on black. I was supposed to use clear embossing thingy. Well, you know what? I can let this dry. Hold on. I was supposed to use clear and black. So let me wipe this down. Oops. So I have a chamois and water. And I'm just going to wipe this sentiment down. The nice thing is that we're using black embossing powder. Do I have another piece of paper? Yes, I do. Okay. So sorry, I meant to use the clear. So that way we have all the different types of inks and powders. So, okay. I can see that I didn't wash that properly. And the black powder. There you go. So if you were doing this as a project, make sure you're using your anti-static tool. For time purposes, I just want to, oops, shook that too much. I just want to make sure I can show you all the things. So there is particles flying around here. Okay, let's melt this one. This one's messy. So once again, just tilting it so I can see it. Okay. So just to show you the different things. So here is the clear embossing ink pad with the black. Here is the black ink pad with clear. And here is black on black. So not much of a difference. I don't think you can see that. Sherry, can you see that?
It's difficult to see a huge difference, but I think the key message is that you have options.
Yes, lots of options. But it's fun. So I would, if you want to remember what it looks like, write it down too. State that you use black ink with clear. This one was black on black, and that way you'll remember what it is. But if you saw it and tried it at home, you would notice that if you're using a colored ink pad with a colored embossing powder, it's darker. It's like a bold font. So lots of ways to do it. So that, sorry. So that one is doing, using a pigment ink pad. So I use black, but here is the fun thing. So as you know, or if you haven't known, in order to get white ink, it's always a pigment ink. So to do that, I am going to use black cardstock because it shows it the best. And let's use the same ink pad. So I am using the Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment Ink. I really love this ink pad. I find it to be the whitest. I haven't found anyone comparable. It's my favorite, and I know it's a lot of ladies' favorites too. So let me show you. So this is white ink. Well, hopefully the black ink is already. Okay, let me do it one more time. So this is also a pigment ink, so it's very inky, it's juicy. So you want to make sure if you're just using the white ink, you want to make sure it's thoroughly dry. So using the white ink only, that is a pretty good white. It's nice. You do see that black shining through, but it's a nice white. But let's say you want it to be even whiter. That's where you would take white embossing powder and put it on top. It is also a pigment ink, so it is wet and it has time for you to put powder on. But just look how that white powder has already stuck onto that white ink, and it's already making it visibly very white compared to a while ago. I do have some particles. So let's just do a quick bet. Okay. So let me put this aside.
And I think as you showed with the previous example with all the blacks, if you only have clear embossing powder, you can change the color of that by having the ink underneath. So either using the white ink or using like a pink ink or that kind of thing, and just use the clear.
Clear on top, yeah, for sure. And you can also use the clear on the white too. So there's lots of things you can do with it. But if you're looking for a nice white on white is always the best answer. So let me show you this. So I'm tilting it again so I can see it start melting. There it is. And I think I got it all here. So see how that made it look totally different? With the white embossing powder, it just, I don't know, it changed your white to become even whiter. So white on white is my favorite. You can use the white pigment ink on its own, but if you're looking for that true white, you want it stark, the embossing powder is the way to go. So I really love it. Just gives you that nice color flow. So that is, I use the Ranger Superfine White, Superfine Embossing Powder. It's a tongue twister here. It's also that if you are stamping with your clear embossing, just similar to what we did with the gold, you can for sure use your white on top and still get a white. So tonight I showed you the basics of how to use your embossing powder with sentiments. And I said earlier I wanted to show you how to use it with other things. So let's put this aside. One of my other favorite techniques is just the watermark. Not using embossing powder, but getting the use out of your pads. So if you have the Wow embossing pad or the Versamark embossing pad, they do have refill bottles, so you can always re-ink it up. But one thing I like to do with this, do I have a solid stamp, is that you can do a watermark random stamping on the background. So I wasn't smart. I didn't pick a solid stamp, but I can show you with some sentiments. Let's see. Oh, here. I have, let's use this one. I'm just going to use a sentiment stamp to show you the watermark. So it's just random stamping in different places to get it. Do I have my acrylic block? Oh boy. Okay, I am going to use the cover to help me because I forgot my acrylic block.
I was just about to say, use the lid, use the lid.
Right? Hey, worst comes to worst, use your lid. Oh, I thought I was prepared too. I had a list, but yeah. So I'm using my lid as my acrylic block. And just to show you that you can do really cute designs of watermarks. So I am going to offset it a little bit. Right? Use the lid. And then let's stamp it. And I just love this watermarking. Even without embossing powder, it gives it a cool look. And one of my favorite cards to do for the holiday is taking a gingerbread and just randomly stamping the gingerbread all over. So right now you can see it's really dark, but as it starts drying, it becomes a little bit more faint. So let's do a couple of this. Let me do 2 more, and then I'll let it set aside while I show you some other things you can do with it. There you go. So if we don't have an acrylic block, use a lid. See, everything's possible. Okay, so let's let this dry for a bit. Let me wipe this.
Maybe in the comments, people can comment on what's the strangest thing you've used in lieu of a stamping block. I know I've used the bottom of a drinking glass as well.
Oh, yeah. Anything flat, really, right? And as long as your stamp can like stick to it, it's awesome. Okay, so right now, you can see it's really dark, but as it dries, it will lighten up. So let's leave this to the side because it will just take some time. You could heat set it, but when you're on the roll, you don't want to heat set it. What's the next thing? Okay, so let's do, here is black. So another technique you can do with embossing powder is one of my favorites, and I know those that took my classes know this is one that I like to show, is double-sided tape technique. So what it is taking your tape, and instead of using the ink pads, you're using the stickiness of your double-sided tape. And here you can do your different designs. So I picked different sizes, so different widths of score tape. And I am going to randomly put some stripes here.
This looks very familiar.
Right? And you know what? We all have double-sided tape, right? Oh, let's do a smaller one. And let's use it. There's so many ways you can use it. Sherry used it with glitter. I'm using it with embossing powder. You could use it with foil. Like, there's so much you could do with it. So I'm just going to, so here I have 3 strips. So if you're doing multiple colors, you don't want to peel all the strips, like all the backings off. You want to do one by one. So here, let's start off with the top one. And I'm just folding the extra pieces underneath. Okay, so, and you pour. So I have gold, black, and white. So let's do gold and black alternating. So here's gold. I am going to pour it on the sticky. It is a wider one, so I am going to make sure I cover the whole thing. Have your, oh, not smart. I should have done it on the scrap paper. Whoops. See, too excited here.
You just got too excited.
Right?
We had lots of people say that they've used their phone as a stamping block.
Yeah.
A marker container, hands or fingers, and a ruler.
Ooh. See, we are very adventurous when it comes to finding ways to, you know, craft. So here I am. It's already stuck on, but before I continue, let me just clean up the mess I did. So don't do what I just did. I forgot to put my paper down, and it's all on the mat. And the worst thing is for this to all, so let me sweep it off onto my paper.
This is another instance when the Swiffer cloth would come into play.
Yes, and that's one thing. Swiffer cloth or the lint rollers.
Ooh, that's a good idea. The lint roller would also clean that up. Great idea.
Okay. Okay. I'm full of gold embossing powder now. Okay. So once that is done, I am going to heat set it before I continue on. Don't worry about the one. You could tell that there's embossing powder stuck to the backing because of the static. So let's heat set that. Whoop. Look at that melt. So fun. Look how pretty that is. So that is the gold on it. So if you were doing this and not in a rush, make sure you're using your powder tool so the static doesn't stay. And now let's find the end piece here. So taking the next release paper, I am going to do white. Oh, okay, so here is white. So I'm just making sure it's on the tape. So I like to do it individually. That way I can pour the extra back into the jars so it doesn't mix. Or if you have a big enough surface and you can have 3 sheets of paper, that would work too. So that is the white, and I have a sparkle one. So let's do that. Whoops. The score tape is sticky. I can't grab it. My fingers. So here is where a pokey tool will come in handy to help with the release paper. And I have unicorn sparkle. So let's not forget this part again. So unicorn sparkle. Ooh. Okay. Very sparkly. Why did I close that? Ooh, I could tell the static is everywhere, but that glitter is really pretty. See? Sherry did glitter last week, and look. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago?
Last week.
It was
Just
last week,
last
right?
week.
But look, we're still glittering things up.
But I bet you're wearing less than I am.
I need a table where is wearing more. So the white and the unicorn white is very similar, but you could tell there is rainbow specks. So if I was very careful, I would be using my little brush tool to take off some of that static. It's all over my hands as well. But a very fun technique to use with your score tape. So one more thing. There's a lot of things to do, but let me show you one more thing that you can do so you can play with your embossing powders at home.
I think this is a clear indication that you'll have to do an embossing folder back to basics part 2.
Embossing powder.
Sorry, what did I say? Folders?
Yes, I think we're both saying.
I was in Chris's head. So yes, embossing powders part 2.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try one more thing. And that is using a more intricate piece. So this is brand new. I haven't used it. Another fun technique that I like to do with embossing powders. Okay, there is a lot. I showed you the basics with sentiments, playing with score tape. Here is another one. So if you have sprays and stuff like that, it's another fun one to do. But there's a lot of ideas out there. So here is the All-In Create. It is this one here. 1226 called letterpress. I am using the old-fashioned camera with the big flower. Now let's see. I don't even remember which way it goes. The camera is up. So let's just do it this way. I can always turn it around. So for this one here, I am going to, so it is a new ink. Because I'm using Versamark already, it does help it season it, making sure. This one here, I most likely will do 2 stamps. Oh, that's in the way. Oops. Let's put it at the bottom. Okay. So making sure, this is where I need my little tool. Okay. Hard to see, but let's try that one more time. Or if you have to go 3 times. I'm trying to see if I see a little watermark there. Hard to tell because we'll find out. So stamp, stamp, stamp. Okay. So this one here, let's do it in clear, and you could do any color, but I wanted to show you something fun. So here is the clear, and oh, you can see it. Can you see that? The powder just stuck on. So there is my image.
Yes, we can see it.
Ooh, awesome. Okay. Let me put this away. I'll heat set it, and then I got to move stuff out of the way because we're going to use the mica sprays and spray on it. And I want to show you what the embossing powder does. But I want to make sure I don't spray ink everywhere else. Okay, let's heat set this. Okay, so I'm just melting it, making sure all the clear I can see, rotating it. So here is the clear embossing showing up now. And let's spray. Okay, let's take a vote. I'm a purple girl. Should we do 2 colors? I have Shiny Bauble and Hocus Pocus. So these are Tim's. I think these are both his Halloween line, and I have one for his winter line. So let's do this. Okay, so okay. Purple, I'm going to just take a paper towel up here. Just to dab off some of the color, or you could heat set it for sure. But see how the embossing powder is resisting against that ink. Like you can see it through. So I did really splurts of that color. Oops. Pull, not turn. Okay, I want to make sure I'm not spraying. Woo! I think that's a little too much blue. Let it dry. So using a heat tool to dry up your ink, and once it is dried, what you would do, look at how pretty that spray is taking just a nice clean paper towel and just wiping the top of the stamp image. All the ink will come off it. So I use clear. If I used white, it would be a little bit bolder. But it's a fun way to use your embossing powder on your cards with a stamped image and using your spray inks. You can also do it if you don't have the any spray stains or inks. You can smush your ink pads on an acetate and then smush it down because it would do the same thing. But lots of fun, lots of playing. But those are some techniques that you can try with your embossing powder. I hope you've picked up something that you can try at home. But let me go back to, here's the watermark. So as you can see, it just does like a watermark on the paper, and you could do this on any technique. So one thing is with the wow powder, I've never really tried, is that you can leave it stamped for a couple minutes and it will still be sticky. But you know what? Now I'm curious because this has been out for a while. Let me see if anything stays on it. Huh. So as you can see that it's not fully dried, even though it looks like it, that it's still sticky. That my powder is still sticking onto the ink.
I seem to remember Marion saying that you could stamp and leave it overnight.
Yeah.
Now.
So it's pretty interesting because this is a couple of minutes and it's still very sticky. But
so much
that
fun.
Is the wow.
So one thing that Jeffrey suggested when you were spraying, put a larger piece of cardstock underneath so that you can have an extra background to play with.
Ooh, yes. Or the wasted ink. Yes. Good tip. Thank you. That way you don't waste your ink that is going on the mat, because right now the pretty ink is on the paper towel.
We can never have too many backgrounds.
No. Yeah, but there. I hope you had fun learning some things with embossing powder.
So like always, everyone, this is now where your the homework portion of the evening comes into play. If you have not played with your embossing powder lately, get it out and play with it. Whether you're stamping a bunch of sentiments or whether you are trying some of the techniques that Darlene shared with you tonight, get it out and play with it. Don't have a specific project in mind. Just play and see what it does. The more you use it, the better you get at playing with it. So unless there's anything else from you, Darlene, we will sign off for the evening.
Have a good night, everyone.
And make sure you don't burn your fingers, everyone. Have a great night.